I'm trying to avoid getting my heart broken again. So in various ways with the iOS beta situation and everything, I mentioned that I had ordered myself an iPhone 13 mini. I had the 12 mini last year as my only phone, and I loved it. And the 13 Pro came out and won me back to the mid-size, which is really quite a large size, with the big camera system and the big battery and everything, because the mini's battery life sucked. Well, then it turned out the 13 mini, while it didn't have any of the fancy camera stuff, it did improve the battery life a bit, and I was a little envious. But I thought, I don't need it. I already have my Pro phone. I'll stick with the Pro. I'll enjoy the camera, etc. And I have for most of the year. And it's this big, heavy brick in my pocket every time I carry it anywhere. And as the summer has been kicking into high gear, and I start wearing shorts as the default.
Oh, here we go again.
The default leg covering. I was even feeling, I'm like, maybe I should buy a 13 mini just for the summer, and then I don't know, just sell it then or whatever. I don't know. If even that, even though I can have 17 different computers and that feels okay, for some reason having two iPhones feels ridiculous. Like that feels like such an extravagance, like such a waste. So I've never really
a pants phone and a shorts phone,
right? So for whatever reason, like I that always felt like that was off limits. There's probably no good excuse why. It's like, well, if I can have a laptop and a desktop, like why can't I have two phones? But it just felt wasteful. Anyway, as I mentioned, I think 2 episodes ago, I gave away my mini for a family member who needed a phone, and so I had only one phone left total that could run iOS 16, and I really, for my various testing configurations, I really need two. And so my mini was that before, and I lost it. So I ordered a new renewed iPhone 13 mini to be my test phone. And I thought, well, now that I have this, now that it's here, I'll put 15 on it, and I'll put 16 on my carry phone. So that's what I've done. And I realized, like, well, maybe I should just take this out. Just take this for a night. I'll pop my SIM card into it and just see.
Here we go.
Maybe I could talk about it on the show. Just that's that famous excuse, right? That's how every podcaster excuses buying gear they don't need.
Yeah, I needed it for the show.
I need to be able to talk about it. But I legitimately need this device as a test device. I just don't need to be using it as my carry phone. So anyway, for a few days, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 days, I use it as my main carry phone again. And it was glorious. It feels so good. And frankly, so I got the blue one. Frankly, I think it looks really good too. Like the back I could care less about. The blue aluminum on the sides though looks really nice in all different lighting conditions. It is way nicer looking than the Pro phone. I have that like baby blue version of the Pro phone.
Same.
It's so much nicer looking. And I don't think the Pro phone looks bad, but that's just how good the non-Pro aluminum looks. Like this wonderful blue color. It's so nice. But I kept telling myself, like, I can't stick with this. I can't, because this is about to die. Like, this whole product line is about to die. And I even thought, like, do I really need the 14 when it comes out? But the answer is I probably need to have one, because it's going to have that low brightness widget mode on the home screen that I'm going to have to test with. So, like, I'm going to get on the train again in the fall for the mid-size phone. So I'm like, I don't want to get my heart broken again. And so yesterday I switched back to the giant phone just because I didn't want to get too used to the mini. And it's so big. Oh my God. It's so big and heavy. Like, and when you look at the specs, like the mini versus the mid-size non-Pro versus the mid-size Pro, it's like, 140 grams, 175, and 200. So the mini is, it's more than half the weight of the big one, but that's still, it just feels both the weight difference and the footprint size difference in your hand. It just feels so big. I still wish there was something between these two sizes. Now, maybe the answer is I just get the big non-Pro phone, but that's not going to solve my development needs for this fall with the always on screen and everything. But anyway, I miss having the small light phone so much. I'm so torn. I am so fortunate that I have a job and the means that I can actually own both of these phones and have to actually test on both of them and have a good reason to buy them, etc. Yes, I know. However, God, I wish they would make better small phones again. And it kind of crushes me that, according to every rumor, that at this point, usually iPhone size rumors are pretty well nailed in by a year before it launches, let alone like a few months. But at this point, it's pretty clear, the Mini is going away. And I miss the days. Like, it feels so good in the pocket. It doesn't look ridiculous in pockets. Like, I'm still a front pocket kind of person, and it doesn't look stupid like with this giant lunch tray in my pocket the way that the big phone does. The difference between the Mini and the Pro is way bigger than the difference between the Pro and the Max. So they really just made like the Max and the Maxer right now. That's how it feels. Like here we are. We have the normal size phone, which is the Mini, and then we have the Max and the Maxer. And it's so sad to me that this is going away, and it'll probably never come back. Like we're never going to have like a 3.5-inch phone again, and that's probably for good reasons. But it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and heavier. And I hope in the future, maybe Apple does more advances with materials, maybe not using steel, maybe reducing the use of glass on the back, because steel and glass are very heavy. So I don't know what they could do. I just hope they do it.
Well, the periscope cameras will, I hope, make it feel not quite as onerous in the pocket. Those were rumored to be coming for the iPhone 14, but turns out not. We talked about that on a past show. Maybe for the 15 or 16. Imagine if it was a phone the size of the plain old 13, but a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter, and totally flat back. That would feel less oppressive in your pocket, I feel like.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I still think that if they can find it in their hearts to make a pro quality phone without steel around the outside, like use the aluminum, it's lighter, it looks better, and it feels better.
I think the steel looks better and feels better. It's not lighter, but I think it looks better and feels better. I would use a case, so who cares? But I think it definitely looks better and feels better.
Yeah, disagree. I will say though, the one, besides the size, I was thinking like, well, if I just switch this for the summer, like, what am I going to miss from the Pro phone? You know what I missed? Shockingly, I would never have guessed this. ProMotion.
Oh, interesting.
I thought there was something wrong with my Mini, that everything was so like jaggy, like all the animations seemed like very low frame rate. I never would have noticed this before using ProMotion for a year now, but now, and I still use a 60 hertz monitor all the time, but for some reason I noticed that instantly, and I thought, oh, maybe it's just because this is like a fresh boot, maybe it's indexing crap in the background and everything, but no, it never went away. Like that, it always felt like low frame rate animation, and that I would never have guessed that.
By the time they do the Mini again, it'll be 120 hertz. Don't worry.
In 3 years.
Yeah, 3, that's optimistic.
No, it won't be. It'll be the next SE probably, and it'll have all the lowest end components.
No, I mean, I feel like the smaller phone thing comes in cycles. They people ask for it, they make one, they're disappointed in the sales, they forget about it for a while. Then people ask for one, they make it, they're disappointed in the sales. It'll come around. I give it 5 years.
I don't think it will, because the thing is, like, the rumors were like nobody's really buying it, and so my anecdotal experience. How many iPhone minis have you seen in the wild that weren't in the hands of an Apple nerd? I can tell you my number, it's 1.
I feel like the next Mini, when the next Mini comes around in 5 years or so, it's not going to be that small. It's going to be smaller than the current 13, but not as small as that little dinky thing.
I don't know. As I've said many times in the past, I would probably at least try for a year having a 13 or a 14 in this case Mini if it had the same camera system as the big guys. But I will not, like, that is my do or die. I will not compromise the camera system. That's not entirely true, I suppose, because when the Max phones had a better camera, I wouldn't go that big. Like, I guess my first tier is no Max phones because I am not a genetic misfit. I have normal size hands. But my second tier is I will not compromise the camera system, and I actually do use all 3 cameras or all 3 lenses frequently. So for me, I don't want to give it up. If the 13 or 14 or 15 or 17 Mini had the same camera system, I'd probably get one. But while it doesn't, it's a no-fly zone for me.
So for whatever it's worth, I know we're a little early for our exit interview for the phone, but I don't like the 3x perspective as like the only thing you have between 1x and zoomed in. Like almost every time that I want something zoomed in, 3x is actually a little bit too much, or it's way too little, in which case nothing would solve the problem. But like 2x, I often used 2x when that was a thing. The 3x is oftentimes too much zoomed in so that I have to then zoom back out, in which case it's just the thing just going to use the 1x lens, in which case I don't even need the 3x lens. and there is still that
Yeah.
noticeable quality degradation. There we go. That's the word.
There it is. I couldn't fabricate it myself. No, I think I agree with you actually. A year ago,
Downgrade. Sorry.
A year ago, I think I would have been a 3X apologist because early on I did like it. But the more I've used it, and I do use it, but I concur with what you said. Either I want like a 20X or something like that, or like I'm just a little bit too far, like, I don't know, I'm across a big table or something like that from a kid or Aaron or something like that. And I don't need 3X, but I need more than 1X. And if only there was something between 1 and 3 that would potentially work in this scenario. So yeah, I think I agree with you.
They get enough pixels in there. You can just, digital zoom out to 2. Like I don't have a 3X camera, so I haven't experienced this, but one of the main places I use 2X is when I'm like trying to take a picture of either a document or a piece of paper or something. And yeah, 1X will work, but very often with 1X, like the phone casts a shadow on the thing because the phone is too close to it. Or, 1X is a little more kind of fisheyed, so the edges get a little bit, wavy. The lens compensation doesn't quite straighten everything out. And if I just want the document to be straight, quick switch to 2X, move the phone up higher, shadow goes off the item, edges are a little bit straighter. There you go. But I can imagine maybe if that was 3X, I would have to hold the phone uncomfortably high and I wouldn't be able to see what it was doing. Really, I should just use the document scanning feature in Notes where it just fixes all that for you. But I kind of wish that was a part of the phone app because I don't want it to go into Notes. I want it to be in my photos, but I want it to be square edge piece of paper. Anyway, my next phone will have a 3X camera, I assume, so I'll try it out.
All right, let's do some follow-up. And we should talk about something we talked about, 250 episodes ago, something like that, which is Bitcode. And I can take a stab at what Bitcode is all about, but perhaps, John, you would be better suited to do this. So can you explain what Bitcode is, and we'll talk about why we're talking about it?
It's the thing where when you upload your application to Apple, instead of sending Apple executable code, you instead send them this Bitcode, which is slightly more abstracted, but it tells you what your program is going to do, but it isn't made for any specific piece of hardware. And then what Apple does is at the time they distribute your application to someone who is downloading it, they decide, what architecture is the person downloading it on, what kind of iPhone do they have, what kind of, whatever, iPad, what processor does it have, so on and so forth. And then they will take the bitcode and convert it to, they probably do this ahead of time, but anyway, convert it to the machine code that will run on your device. So even though what you upload is bitcode that will run on any device, what you download is a thing that's made specifically for your architecture. It's a way to give people slightly smaller downloads. It's a way to be able to take that thing that was uploaded and target hardware that might not have even been released at the time you built that bitcode, right? Because you're uploading the bitcode and maybe later that year, Apple releases a new piece of hardware that has a new instruction that, you don't have to upload a new app. They can just convert the bitcode that you uploaded to use that new instruction if it will make some piece of your code faster while still keeping the functionality the same. Like, that's the idea behind Bitcode. And I believe Bitcode was mandatory for watch apps. Marco, do you remember the details on this?
It was always mandatory for watch apps, and it was optional for iOS apps.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Bitcode. And the story is Bitcode is deprecated now. So what Bitcode came out when? I got to click on this link to see how old this episode was. ATP episode 205 when we interviewed Chris Latner, 2017. So it's been around for a while. And I think Chris talked about it in our interview, like why it exists, what the advantages are. But now it's not going to be a thing anymore. So starting with Xcode 14, Bitcode is no longer required for watchOS and tvOS applications, and the App Store no longer accepts Bitcode submissions from Xcode 14. So if you've got Bitcode up there, it'll keep working, but it's no longer required, and you can't even send it from Xcode 14. So Bitcode is done, and they're just sort of phasing it out. And they suggest that you update your projects and, change the build settings to disable Bitcode, and so on and so forth. And the compatibility to build with Bitcode will be removed from a future Xcode release, Apple says. IPAs that contain Bitcode will have their Bitcode stripped before being submitted to the App Store. Debug symbols for past Bitcode submissions are made available for download, right? So this is interesting just because Bitcode, I think, was interesting. It's an interesting idea, and when I saw that it was being deprecated, obviously we don't know what goes on inside Apple, even on things that have a semi-public face, like we see like Swift language evolution and stuff like that. But this smells to me entirely like a feature whose champions have left, right? That someone had this idea for Bitcode, or some group of people have this idea for Bitcode, and they pitched and they said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what the advantages are. It's got advantages to our users. It's got advantages to us. It's a good idea. In fact, it's such a good idea. Let's make it mandatory on the watch. And either the things that it promised to fulfill, like we could release new hardware with that, that we can retarget existing Bitcode to that new hardware, and developers don't have to submit a new app, right? And smaller downloads and all that type of stuff. That either those gains were not realized, like they never actually did that, or they were realized, but the benefits that they got from them did not match the downsides of having to deal with Bitcode and all the machinery to, churn out the right versions or whatever. But in general, someone had this idea at Apple and championed it and released it and promoted it. And it seems like one of the ways these projects like this happen in big companies is the people who are super enthusiastic about it and who are promoting all those benefits left the company or moved on to do other things, or they're on Project Titan now or whatever. And the remaining people, after a few years of shepherding Bitcode and, babysitting it and looking at it, the same questions would get asked. Why are we doing Bitcode again? What is this giving us? Especially if, say, it caused a problem once or twice, or, it seems like running the whole Bitcode thing was a problem. Like, what are these theoretical benefits? And the champions were no longer there to say, no, we have to do Bitcode. Here's why, because it's going to be awesome for this and that other thing. And instead, it was just the people who were sort of shepherding it saying, yeah, I guess it's okay. But, eventually someone has the guts to say, should we just stop doing this? And then it goes away. Now, I'm weaving this whole big story of what could be happening inside Apple. I have no information on this whatsoever, but that's what this smells like. And I think that's a natural thing to happen, especially in big companies, to get any idea from someone's head to become an actual project that goes out to the public, especially in a company like Apple. It's so difficult and requires so many skills beyond doing the thing, having to do with promoting the thing, explaining why it's a good idea, getting support from all the people who need to give you a thumbs up for this to go through, right? And a lot of that is predicated on promises. I think this will do X, Y, and Z for us, right? And sometimes those things just don't turn out, or sometimes they turn out, but the time where they had a big benefit has passed, and now it's not, maybe during the 32 to 64 transition or whatever was a big deal, but now it's not that big a deal. But the costs remain. And so I think it is actually a good thing that, assuming this is the right call, again, I don't know inside Apple, but assuming this is the right call, it is an important thing for companies to do, to decide when a thing they decided to do many years ago has either not worked out or its time has passed and it's time to sort of put it to bed. And I think this will mostly not impact developers too harshly. There's going to be a long transition period, and this was, the benefits to developers probably were minimal. Do you know of a case where Bitcode made your app run slightly faster than it would have without you resubmitting a new app? If that happened, developers probably wouldn't even know about it.
Chris talked about it in the interview because I re-listened to that section of the interview to remind me. And this was actually one of my favorite things that he spoke about on that interview, or at least one of the few things I remember all these years later, which is, and he had a specific example, and I'm going to butcher the details, but the idea was there was a processor, I think the comically named Swift processor. I forget which one it was. It was like iPhone 5 or something like that. And it had as a hardware instruction integer, either multiplication or division or something like that. And so what you could do, or what Apple could do, is say, hey, I built, let's say, Masquerade for the prior processor that does not have this special opcode for integer division or whatever it was. But because I'm submitting to them Bitcode, they can do the appropriate conversions such that the version of my app that's downloaded does use this new hardware instruction. So I get the benefits of this really fancy hardware instruction without having even known it existed when I compiled my code, which is pretty neat.
Right, but do you notice that benefit as a developer? Do you even know that it happened?
As a developer, no.
Right, so in theory, it's benefiting you because your app runs faster or something, right?
Right, exactly.
So, but is that a benefit that you would notice and care about if they took it away? Yeah, probably not. And how much faster would it make your app? And on the flip side of that is, okay, that's how it's supposed to go. But what if there's a problem? What if, we're supposed to do it in such a way that it is functionally identical to the previous version? So when the new instruction comes out, we can just, use the Bitcode to produce that thing. But maybe some part of this application relied on some, unintended side effect of the previous instruction that it was using. And now all of a sudden this person's app behaves differently or has a bug or something like that, and they lose time on that, right? Or, like I said, just the cost to maintain the infrastructure that, that processes the Bitcode for all the different architectures. And, there's definitely costs involved in this, and the benefits of them. I think the reason we haven't talked about Bitcode very much is it's not something that developers are like, oh, Bitcode is a lifesaver. I'm so glad Apple did that. It makes my life as a developer so much better, and it makes my apps better for my users. I mean, maybe it does a little bit, but not so much that, I haven't seen anyone kick up a fuss about this deprecation, right? Like no one is saying, no, don't take away Bitcode. It's like, huh? All right, I guess it's time has passed. Obviously, would love to know what the real story is. And obviously, one person who did leave Apple is Chris Latner, who seemed to love Bitcode. But I don't think it's the type of thing, well, once Chris Latner left, it was just, a few short years before they decided to deprecate it and turn it off. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that.
All right, so apparently Marco got a belated birthday present because there is a new big HomePod rumor. Marco, did we read this by chance?
This literally could not have been better timed. I spent the first 10 minutes of last week's show basically begging, please, why aren't there HomePod rumors? Please, Apple, make a new big HomePod. I hope they still make HomePods. And sure enough, I mean, it must have been 2 hours after we released that show. Mark Gurman, in his newsletter for Bloomberg, has in one of these various Gurman dumps of here's 17 new products we expect in the next year, and also one of them happens to be a new larger HomePod. It's a Gurman rumor. It usually he gets most of the hardware things right. The timing isn't always right. The marketing isn't always right, but he gets most of the existence of hardware products right. And so I'm inclined to believe that this is likely to happen. I don't know when it'll happen. I don't know what exactly it'll be. But what he says is the upcoming HomePod will run an S8 chip, which is the same one that's going to be in the watches this fall. And I looked it up. The HomePod Mini is, I think, an S4. And so it's also a watch chip, but it's a few years older. The previous large HomePod ran the A8 chip from iPhones from 1 billion years ago. One of my complaints with the big HomePod, besides the fact that it dies and is unreliable, is that it's extremely slow to do anything. And that is something that, when you use a big HomePod and then you use a HomePod Mini, the difference is night and day. The HomePod Mini is way more responsive, way faster. It's still not fast, mind you, in absolute terms, but it is way faster than the big HomePod with its crappy A8 chip. So, for this to be a few generations ahead of where the HomePod Mini is in the processor is probably a very good thing. And Gurman also says that it'll be, quote, closer to the original HomePod in terms of size and audio performance rather than a new HomePod Mini. And it will allegedly have an updated display on top, possibly with multi-touch. So that's all interesting. That all sounds like it solves problems that the HomePod had. If it's going to have much more responsive performance, that's great. If it's going to have better audio capabilities than the Mini, that's great because we need that in the market. And the display and touch interface to it also sucked. And so to have that be, possibly improved or expanded upon, that's also great. So this sounds awesome. I really, really hope this is true, and I hope it pans out this way. And if so, it can't get here fast enough. He said, I believe it's going to be 2023 sometime. So not soon, but I'm happy to hear that this product line is most likely not dead, and that the HomePod Mini is most likely not intended to be the only thing in it.
I kind of fear that based on this extremely vague rumor, that the thing I'm picturing in my head, I mean, I guess you would take it, Marco, because, beggars can't be choosers, but I'm picturing a HomePod Mini that's bigger that still just has one speaker in it, as opposed to the umpteen speakers that are inside the big HomePod, basically just a larger speaker, a larger speaker cone, but still just one. So yeah, that will be better than the Mini, but I don't think, based on their past experience and this rumor, it doesn't seem like it's going to be something that is going to match the audio quality of your current big HomePods.
Well, there's a lot of room between those. So, when you only have one driver, in a speaker, usually, in very tiny speakers, you have one cone, one speaker cone. And when you get larger speakers, you typically have multiple speaker cones. They're called drivers, and they are different sizes to cover different frequency ranges. The bigger the cone is, the more it covers the bass. The smaller the cone is, the more it covers the treble. Or you get these little tiny tweeter things that aren't even cones anymore because they're so small. Anyway, the more you can separate out the roles, you get different benefits there. And also, the larger the driver is, the harder it is to serve the full range of sound. So what I hope is happening here is, there's a lot of room between the one driver and the, quote, passive radiators that the HomePod Mini has, and the, I believe, 9 drivers or something like that the big HomePod had. I think it had 7 mid-range and tweeters up in the ring, or down in the ring, and then it had 1 woofer, or were there 2 woofers in force canceling configuration? I don't know, I forget. Anyway, there's a lot of room between those two. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense, I don't think, audio engineering-wise or mechanically or quality-wise, to have a significantly larger speaker than the HomePod Mini that only has 1 driver in it. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's probably going to split out the woofer and the mid-range / tweeter into at least 2 drivers. And that is great. That alone is, in many cases, enough. And one thing that was very impressive, what they did with the full-size HomePod, they were able to get surprisingly good bass in a surprisingly small space with the type of woofer they used. You don't need a ton of these things. You just need a little bit more than 1. And the original HomePod, it had the 7 mid-range drivers all in a circle, so it could fire in 360 degrees of sound. Most people don't need that in most spaces. Most people need sound to come out at most 180 degrees in front of it. And that's great. Like, if it can be a wide soundstage that's still only 180 degrees instead of 360, that's still awesome. That's still better than most passive, non-smart speakers that only have a couple of drivers facing forward. That's nowhere near 180 degrees of coverage. So it's still better than that. I think they can really get away with maybe 4 drivers. Like, I'd say 1 woofer and 3 mid-range / tweeters. Forward, left, and right on the tweeters. That's probably enough. So that's a huge component reduction from what they have now.
You're going to have to fight the designers on that, because they're going to say, well, wait a second, what you're describing is a product that is directional, so we can't make it symmetrical. Like, if it fires in a circle, there's no front to the HomePod, right? Whichever way you put it, like, it adapts to whatever. But if you actually have something that, even if you have something that has a forward-facing driver and a backwards-facing driver, you have to know where forward and back is. They have to put, like, an arrow on it or something, like, so you know how to face the 180 degrees into the room.
No, but you already know that, though, because you know where the cord goes in the back, and you know where the buttons are aligned on top.
Yeah, the cord could probably do it. Although I feel like, not that this is what Apple will do, but like, good product design would make that way more obvious than you just having to know that the cord goes to the sound. Yeah, it looks like it's a perfect cylinder, but keep in mind that the sound comes out opposite of the way the cord goes. And if you don't realize that and like put it sideways, why does the sound so bad? And you don't know this, your symmetrical, cylinder is firing into the wall to the side of you instead of into the room.
I know this is probably a pipe dream. I don't think they will do this. I would love for them to do this. It would be great if the HomePod had a line-in jack on the back. And so if they're going to do anything like that, or even if, God forbid, they would make the cable removable and replaceable, maybe you could replace it with a shorter one. That would be amazing. Suppose they were going to add a port to it. I know that's a lot to ask. Then there would probably be like a little like flattened area on the back where the cables come in. So that would be another thing to fix that, that symmetry problem. But also, I don't even think necessarily that they need to do a ton of cost cutting here, because they now have the HomePod Mini, which is the value product. When they launched the first HomePod, they were entering a market where everyone buys things for $50 to $100 from Amazon or Google or whatever. They came in with something that was $350 as their only entry to the market. Of course, we all made fun of the price because it was ridiculously overspec'd for that market, and that's not what people wanted out of a smart speaker most of the time. But now they have the value segment covered. So even if they come out with this next HomePod and it's $350 again, in that price range, for what it offers, it actually is, as I mentioned before, pretty competitive. It's just a much smaller market. So I hope they actually try to bridge the gap a little bit. I hope they go a little bit down market, get them something they could sell for $200 to $250. That, I think they would do a decent amount of volume, and nobody would say, oh my God, that's way too expensive, if it's significantly improved from the HomePod Mini in terms of size and sound detail.
I don't know. I'm curious to see what comes of this, because I feel like I'm starting to sniff about in the HomePod space. The Alexas that we have are getting obscenely chatty and constantly wanting to sell us stuff and tell us stuff, which granted, this is not terribly surprising. But when we first got them, got a couple of them a few years back, they were extremely quiet unless they were being spoken to. And now they're constantly needing attention. They're ridiculous. They're like toddlers now. But
no, as far as I'm concerned, Amazon had the lead in this area and threw it away.
Yeah, agreed.
Amazon could not have fumbled this worse than they have. I don't know a lot of people who have Amazon Echoes or their family of products who are super happy with them right now.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And whereas, a few years ago, they were the leaders. They were the king of the world in this space, and they just got more and more annoying and needy and pushy, and people reacted very poorly to that. We are sponsored this week by Locket, a thoughtfully designed, simple, and elegant iOS app, and they're looking to hire their next iOS engineers. This is a pretty good opportunity, I think. So with Locket, you see updates from your favorite people on your phone right there on your home screen through widgets. So the way it works is you follow whatever small group you want. This is not like a public platform. This is a private platform for either maybe just you and your partner, or maybe you and your close family, close friends, however you want to do it. It's a small private group. And when you open your phone, you look at your phone all day, when you see that widget, you will see the most recent pictures that this small group has sent. They can send them very easily throughout the day, and then you can tap right there and take a picture and show it to them on all of their widgets. So it's a way for you to really keep in touch with a very small group of people privately, without all the baggage that comes with a big social network, but still being social with your friends and family or with your partner. So it's a really cool concept, and a lot of people have gotten into this. So since just this year, over 500 million Lockets have been sent. They've had more than 20 million downloads. The app's been in the top 10 in the social networking chart in the App Store since launch. But even though they're operating now at quite a scale, their team is still only 3 people. So this means their next iOS hire will get to play a central role in building and defining the app. This app that ships to millions, you can be right there. You can be making a big impact by being part of this very small staff. This is a very nice, thoughtfully designed iOS app. They really care about getting the details right. And by working with Locket, you're really going to be building a new social network on a new frontier, the home screen, through the use of widgets. And this can really make your phone feel fun and personal again, and you can feel proud to make your friends the center of your phone. So if you're an iOS engineer, get in touch. You can reach out to them at locket.camera/jobs. That's locket.camera/jobs, or reach out to their founder, Matt Moss, on Twitter directly. Thank you so much to Locket for sponsoring our show.
John, tell me about passkey syncing. What's the story here?
It's a tweet from Ricky, and it says,
both.
In iOS 16 and macOS Ventura, there isn't any UI to disable syncing of credentials made via WebAuthn. Those are the passkey things. Passkeys, a replacement for passwords, sync across devices and are backed up with iCloud keychain. So this is just a statement of fact. We talked before about how you can airdrop passkeys to somebody or whatever, but just when you're using passkeys yourself, they will sync via iCloud keychain to all your devices. And that is not an option, because some people are asking, hey, what if I want to have a passkey and it's like only on my phone or something? Can I do that? And the answer is no. They sync everywhere. And it's obviously everyone makes different trade-offs between security and convenience. In this first iteration, the choice Apple is making is that a balance between security and convenience that is well suited for most people. Because for most people, if you allowed them, or if it didn't sync everywhere by default, or if you allowed them to turn it off, they can end up in a situation where they have a passkey that gets into some account at some point in the future if people start using these things, and it's only on their phone, and the phone's not backed up, because that is a thing that you can do. Oh, I ran out of iCloud space. I didn't want to pay for it. Who pays for iCloud space? And they drop their phone into the ocean, and that was the only place the passkey was to log into their account. And they try to log into their account, and they can't, and they're angry about it, right? Syncing everywhere is the thing that makes passkeys a viable replacement for passwords, because then if you lose any one of your devices, or even all your devices, because iCloud keychain is an iCloud, if you lose your devices, or they break, or your house burns down or whatever, you don't lose your ability to log into all your accounts. kind of like, in theory, you wouldn't lose it with passwords. Because if you knew your passwords, which probably you don't, but let's say you knew your passwords, which probably means they're bad passwords. Oh, my house burned down, but I have memorized these 97 high-quality passwords. Probably not true, but in theory, it could be done. But with passkeys, you never know what they are. They're just on your devices. So it has to sync because that is what will protect most people from themselves. But for people who want to have a different trade-off between security and convenience, iOS 16 and macOS Ventura do not give that option, at least in the UI. This is a very specific tweet. It says there isn't any UI to disable the syncing of credentials. Is there a command line way to do it? Is there some secret key? Who knows? But I think this is the right call because if you made this optional or made people have to turn it on, people could really get themselves into trouble. Again, this all requires passkeys to become a thing because if you don't log in anywhere with passkeys, who cares what it does? But I think this is the right call. But for people who are very security conscious and want to have a thing where like you do with the hardware YubiKeys or whatever, where this is the one and only place where this thing is, that's not something passkeys is going to do, at least in this first iteration.
Indeed. We have incredibly important follow-up to cover. This is with regard to Caffé Macs and the meals there. And we got some feedback, and I will read it now. Pacific Rim, Pangea, etc. are the different kitchens and not the name nor type of dishes that they're offering. We were theorizing that, the Pacific Rim entry for the WWDC meals, that means it's a meal from the Pacific Rim. No. Apparently that's the kitchen, and Pangea is a kitchen, etc. So anyway, going back to the feedback, employees use an app to order everything. For all the restaurants, they do a daily special and have a couple of staples available every day. This person writes, I worked at Infinite Loop, but the kitchens are all the same at Apple Park and all the other Caffé Macs in Cupertino. I worked there for a few months and ate everything. Everything's pretty good with the exception of the grill. Think cruise food kitchen. Basic American stuff with no frills.
A little bit of real-time feedback on the passkey thing. Some people in the chat room were asking about this. One question was, hey, wait a second. I thought passkeys weren't supposed to leave your device. There's a thing that Apple has done in a lot of their literature about passkeys and their presentations. It's easy to miss. But if you're thinking about it, like, what are you talking about passkeys syncing with iCloud Keychain? Because, it's supposed to stay on my device and never leave my device, right? But how does it sync if it doesn't leave my device? Doesn't make sense. What they always say in their presentations and documentation is, your passkey does not leave your device when you log into something. Like, I'm signing into my thing. Unlike your password, which you send over the internet to the website that you're logging into, your passkey does not leave your device when you log in, right? It's your data. You keep it in your secure enclave. It is yours to sync with as you want using the end-to-end encrypted iCloud keychain that even Apple can't get access to or whatever. So yes, it does leave your device when it syncs to your other devices, and it leaves your device when you airdrop it to somebody else. But when you log in on a daily basis, log into this service, log into that service, it does not leave your device then, which means A, it doesn't leave your device most of the time when you're using it, and B, the things you're logging into never see it. You don't send it to them, they don't have to store it, they don't have to store a hash of it, they don't have any piece of it. They have your public key, which is totally public and anybody can have, and it's fine. They don't get your private key when you log in, so there's that distinction. And then somebody asked, what if you only have one Apple device? Why would you still want syncing? That's because if you drop your one Apple device in a lake, you better hope someone's got a copy of that passkey. And who has a copy of it? It's in your iCloud keychain, which is on Apple server somewhere. But they can't decrypt it because it's end-to-end encrypted.
All right, let's briefly talk about buy now, pay later. This is becoming more relevant in my world because Apple has announced that they're going to do a buy now, pay later thing via Apple Pay. And we got a bunch of feedback about this. And honestly, this could go on for hours. And so I just thought I'd cover a couple of quick things. I didn't really know how this worked and who made money and how. And the summary that I will offer up to you, the listener, is that apparently the way this works is when you go to buy something, you pay in generally speaking, you pay in 4 installments. You pay the first one immediately and then 3 more installments in 2, 4, and 6 weeks later. What happens is the merchant pays a little bit more money or a little bit higher percentage than they would for a straight up credit card transaction. And the people that are doing buy now, pay later, like Affirm or one of the many other companies, Afterpay, they basically make their money by taking a little bit more fee than a credit card. Now, why would the merchant be interested in this? They do this because they're told and people believe that the conversion is way higher. So it is much more likely that the thing that was in your shopping cart actually gets purchased when you can do it in 4 installments instead of just one big lump sum. There was a pretty good episode of Planet Money about this. That's only like 20, 25 minutes. We'll put a link in the show notes. But what's interesting about this is we don't know a whole lot about how Apple specifically is going to conquer this. From what we've gathered, or from what people have dug up, it sounds like Apple is going to be the one providing the financing. So, if you're buying a $100 item and you're doing that in 4 $25 installments, then Apple's floating you $75, right? Because you're paying 25 immediately, and then 25 in 2 weeks, 25 in 4 weeks, 25 in 6 weeks.
Where will Apple get all that money from?
Geez, I don't know. Since they're so cash strapped, it's going to be real hard.
I like the idea of people saying, "Oh, Apple's not using a bank for this; they're going to be their own bank." I assume Apple probably has more money than most banks.
Yeah, exactly. Well put. So Apple will float it, but what is interesting is apparently and I'm a little fuzzy on the details here, but apparently they're using Goldman Sachs to vend, for lack of a better word, and that's probably technically incorrect, a MasterCard such that it's I guess like a and again, I'm way out of my comfort zone here, but I guess it's like a phantom MasterCard that the transaction is rung up against, and that they're using Goldman Sachs for, but the floating of this hypothetical $75 is Apple's money, and they will hopefully make their money back by taking slightly higher fees. And
that sounds like to use a software pattern, it's like the adapter pattern. Like the entire payment system doesn't know about these things, so it has to masquerade as if you paid with a slightly higher fee credit card, because from the merchant's perspective, they get all the money at once. It doesn't look like buy now, pay later to them. It just looks like, oh, this is like a really high fee for this credit card or whatever. And like Casey said, the reason they're willing to pay the higher fee is, I'm assuming they don't just think, I'm sure it is actually true, that people buy more stuff when you get all the money, but they're only paying part of that money. So they're more likely to purchase things. So they're willing, the vendors, the merchants, there's too many stupid terms. The stores where you buy stuff, the store is willing to pay a higher fee to get that customer to buy the thing. And to them, it just looks like a high fee credit card.
There are a bunch of catches and caveats with this. We're not going to go into all of them, but the short version is there's not a lot of protections around this because, governments haven't really caught up to this being a thing yet. Additionally, there's not a lot of protections to make sure that there's no predatory lending, although this tends to be not as predatory a practice to begin with, which is good.
Yeah, because it's much shorter term than credit cards.
Right. And it has an end point. Like it has a defined end rather than, I'll just keep paying my $25 minimums until the end of time.
Right.
And a lot of things don't actually even charge any interest. It's just like, look, you have to pay this off, and this is the amount you have to pay, and here's the schedule you have to pay it. And if you fail to pay on that schedule, you just can't use that buy now, pay later service anymore.
And we'll send it to collections. So it can.
Yeah, no, they'll get your money somehow. But the whole point is they're not willing to do what credit cards do, which is just make the minimum payment for the rest of your life. Right. That's not an option. They're not trying to make money from you that way. Yes, they need you to pay back the money, and they will get it from you if they can. But the stopgap is, unlike a credit card where you can just keep paying the minimum and keep using that card, you can't use your buy now, pay later thing anymore if you have not made the payments on your existing thing. So it sort of kills your payment method until you pay it off.
Yep. And then the other interesting thing is what happens if you buy something and it turns out you're getting totally ripped off. Well, there's no idea of a chargeback or anything like that because you're not really purchasing this through a credit card company that supports that sort of thing. You're purchasing it through Apple or Afterpay or what have you. And so there's a lot of ways that it's not as safe for a consumer, but the advantage is, especially for naive consumers, and I don't mean that dismissively, or inexperienced perhaps is a better word for it, is that you're not looking at a 20% credit card fee that could follow you, like you guys were saying, until the end of time. Like this has a defined stop date, and that's 6 weeks from whenever you purchase. So I find this very interesting. As someone who has basically treated his credit card like a debit card for his entire life, I don't think this is necessarily for me, but it is a very interesting approach. And I'm very curious to see what Apple does with this and how this works out for Apple.
I feel like there is ample room for what they call innovation in the finance space to figure out, okay, but what if we did charge people fees and interest? Right? It's very, the way the banking industry finds a way to make money off things that don't seem like they make money. Like most banks essentially make money off fees now. Like they don't, the old model of the bank takes your money and they hold it for you and they use it to give people loans. They charge interest on those loans. No, they just charge you fees, and that's how they make all their money, right? And so there's so many places in the system where you can add a little fee. In fact, someone in the chat room is saying if you miss a payment, they charge you a $10 penalty or something. Just little fees it's not interest, but yeah, if you miss a payment, it's this fee or whatever. But we'll let you use your card. It's kind of like, think of everything used to gamify the casino games for children on the App Store, right? Oh, you missed a payment, so A, you get a $10 penalty, but B, do you still want to use this payment method? Because normally we would stop you, but if you pay $20 now, we'll let you use it for another purchase.
Pay $30 for a boost and a loot box.
Exactly, right. It's like, do you want to use it for an extra 24 hours? You can have an extra week on this. We'll let you use it even though you haven't paid that off, but it's just a $50 fee, or it's just and okay, so it's not interest, but it's a way to make small amounts of money, knowing that people will miss a payment or buy something that's a little bit more than they can afford and have to wait for the next paycheck to pay it off. Like the industry of finding a way to make people feel good about buying something, like, oh, this is great. I don't have to pay it all at once. I'll pay it now. It's real easy. And not realize that future them is going to miss that payment, and then they're going to have to pay a fee, and then just like multiply that over millions of people. It's like, it's in the industry's nature to exploit human weakness to make small amounts of money that people don't notice.
And now Apple's in all these businesses. Great.
Right. Well, I mean, in theory, kind of like they did with Apple Card, Apple will try to do the slightly better version of that. Because like I said before, I think the upside for Apple for doing this is let's make more people, use Apple Pay, more transactions going through Apple payment methods. Apple wants to drive more people to use its payment systems. So that's the benefit it gets. But kind of like services where it's like, okay, well, Apple's business, they make all their money from selling phones, but they want to give services to make their phones more valuable. Eventually, if something is successful, somebody wakes up and notices, you know what? Services actually make a lot of money too. And unlike phones now, it's growing. So that should become a profit center for us instead of just a way to make our phones more valuable. And that can easily happen with payment methods if they ever get to that point. Because it may right now be a way to just drive more people to buy things on their phones and so on and so forth. But we don't charge late fees, and we don't do this, we don't have any interest. But 5 years from now, someone, Bean Counter, runs the numbers and says, you know what, services have stopped growing, but this payment method stuff, this is a gold mine. If we add a 1% fee for increase our fee for missed payments by 1 cent per year, we make an extra $1 billion. And then we're looking at the Apple payments graph go up and up in our old age.
We are sponsored this week by Trade Coffee. If you want to make great coffee at home, the number one tip I can give you is get freshly roasted beans delivered to you. That's it. That's the secret. You don't need like extra fancy equipment or technique. You just need really freshly roasted beans. And Trade Coffee connects you to over 60 of the country's best craft roasters. And they have over 450 roasts that they have taste tested. So they know that you want a broad variety available to you, but then they have this amazing quiz that will help you sort through everything that's out there. And they will actually recommend, but with their quiz, and I found it to be very accurate with myself, they'll actually recommend, based on what you've told us you like and what your preferences are, this is what you should be looking at. And they are so confident they're going to get this right that if they don't match you correctly the first time, they'll take your feedback and an actual human expert will work with you to send you a brand new bag for free. And these are such great varieties they have there. I've been a Trade customer in the past. I'm presently a Trade customer. It's just great for not only for having amazing coffee delivered to you, but also for variety. Sometimes you want to try different things here and there, and they have such a high hit rate for me. I don't think I've ever gotten anything from them that I really didn't like. It's really great with Trade. You get this freshly roasted coffee delivered to you, whole beans or ground, however you like, super customizable, and it's just amazing service with Trade. They have over 5 million bags they've delivered to customers. They have over 750,000 positive reviews. Check out Trade. They're offering new subscribers a total of $30 off your first order plus free shipping by going to drinktrade.com/ATP. That's more than 40 cups of coffee for free. Get started by taking their quiz at drinktrade.com/ATP. Let Trade find you a coffee you'll love. That's drinktrade.com/ATP for $30 off. Thanks to Trade for sponsoring our show.
All right, so apparently in the infinitely long list of reasons why the 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2 is a piece of is because the SSDs are apparently way slower, which is cool.
This is kind of disappointing for this computer because honestly, I don't think it's really of all the things that are wrong with this computer, this one of them is a thing that could have happened to any computer, right? It could have happened to the nicest computer. It didn't. It happened to this cruddy computer.
It happens to every computer sometime.
Yeah, right. It's true. So the thing that happens is when you put storage in a computer, whether it's RAM or SSDs or whatever, You can buy the little chips that make up either the RAM or the flash storage or whatever in various sizes. And sometimes the biggest size you can get is not big enough to do the thing that you want. So like say you wanted to have, in this case, a 256 gigabyte SSD. Can I get a 256 gigabyte single chip? No, you got to buy two of them. You got to buy 128 and 128. So, all right, fine. Because there's no 256s available, or they are available, but they're exorbitantly expensive, right? And this is not our top end computer, right? So we're going to buy two of those chips, and that'll make, two 128s will make 256. Years go by, the new model of this machine comes out. It's like, oh, actually, we can get single chip 256 gigabyte flash storage now. So in the new computer, we won't have to buy a 128 and 128. We'll just buy one 256 because it's not more expensive and it'll use less power and it'll take up less space and so on and so forth. And in the case of the M2 MacBook Pro, we're not going to redesign the motherboard. Like, we're just going to put one chip there. Like, there used to be a place for two chips, but now we'll just buy one of them for the base model because the base model has a 256 gig SSD. Before we had to buy a 128 and 128. Now we can just buy a single 256. March of progress. Fine, right? The problem is the way SSDs work in that Mac and in many Macs is if you put two chips there, the little controller that reads the solid state storage can read from and write to both of those chips at the same time.
Two chips at the same time.
Yeah, it's again, it's not like RAID or anything. This is all invisible to the operating system. It looks like a single volume, but practically speaking, there's enough bandwidth and the controller knows how to talk to both of them at the same time. So when they went from two 128 chips to a single 256 chip, it cut the disk speed in half. Because previously it could do, both at once, and it's just straight up parallel, like, oh, you're writing stuff, I'll write some here and some there, and I'll do it both at the same time. And with just one chip, the speed gets cut in half. And that's not great. So if you bought a base model M1 MacBook Pro, the Touch Bar M1 MacBook Pro, with a 256 gig SSD, and it came with two 128 gig flash things, that thing's SSD...
Flash things, that's what they're called.
Twice as fast as the new M2 one. Only if you get the base model. Now, if you get an M2 with a bigger SSD, then they have to do two chips again because they can't get them big enough, right? So I don't know what the size is. I think if you just get a 512, they give you two 256 chips, and then you get your speed back. But this is one of those weird things that you'd have to be a nerd to know about, that some person's going to go in and they're going to get this machine, and in addition to all the other things that are bad about this machine that we talked about before, they're going to get the base model because it's the cheapest and not realize they're getting a slower SSD than if they had bought the M1 version of this. And that's a bummer, especially at the low ends. Now you have to have a nerdy friend who tells you, don't buy the 256 gig if you care about SSD speed. If you don't care about SSD speed, people won't notice as they're browsing the web and using Microsoft Word or whatever. But it just makes this machine more of a bummer with yet more reasons to be wary of it.
As much as this sucks to be a regression, because this was not true of the M1 version. Like the M1 base model did not have this problem, just because of different chip configurations, as John said. But it sucks that like this is yet another reason why people are getting a subpar experience with this machine by a lack of information. They're going to go into an Apple store, they're going to see, oh, here's something that says Pro and is inexpensive relative to the other Pros. I must get this over the air. And by the way, I fully expect the Air to have this exact same problem. Like, this generation of these storage chips with this M2 generation of architecture, whatever, like this generation of these chips is going to have this problem. So I expect all of the M2 products in the 256 configuration, I expect them all to have this exact same problem this time around. And it just sucks. Like, there's just more asterisks where we have to like, as John said, consult your nerd friend and be like, hey, what's the right one to buy? And now it's more complicated. And and the reality is, like, SSD speed, like, it's really fast either way. It's just much faster this other way. And sustained transfer rates from SSDs aren't that important of a performance characteristic of modern computers. What sucks more about this is that it's a regression, and a significant one in a certain metric. Not necessarily that it's going to result in a very noticeably slow computer in most operations. It won't. And I would also argue, like, if you're buying, A, this computer at all, and B, the base model storage, performance might not be very important to you. Like, there's a much higher chance than usual if you're buying the base SSD that you're not really in it for the disk performance.
It's kind of a shame that it's on the model with Pro suffix, though, because maybe you would think this would be faster. I'm kind of afraid that when the M2 MacBook Air comes out, it won't have this problem because it will have like a redesigned motherboard, or the base model will use 2 chips or something like that. And so the base model Air will have a faster SSD. But this whole issue has made all of the people who have been testing this, sort of look around a little bit more, as they occasionally do, and say, Apple's SSDs used to be super fast in their Macs, but they haven't really kept up. If you look at the SSDs that are coming in a lot of PC laptops in similar classes, you can get much faster SSDs in a similar price range. So we look at let's look at a Microsoft laptop or a Dell laptop in a similar price range and do tests on its SSDs, because there are faster SSDs coming out all the time, and Apple hasn't really kept up in this area. Again, not that they're slow, and on the Air, who cares? If the Air has this problem, if you're buying a base model Air with 256 gigs, your main problem is probably going to be that you bought a laptop with 256 gigs in it, which is going to feel really tight to you, I think. And your secondary problem is the performance, but it's the Apple's cheapest laptop. It's the base model of Apple's cheapest laptop. So what do you expect? But the one that has the Pro in the name, the whole point is, you're stepping up to something that's a little bit better. And it would be really disappointing to step up to something that has a quarter of the performance of a similarly priced SSD in a PC laptop. Again, not that it's a spec race or whatever. Just feel like Apple has to do some minimum amount to keep up here. At various points, Apple's SSDs were really fast, and I think they're just like a little bit behind in this generation. Maybe it's because like the PCIe 4 stuff is coming out on the PC side, and Apple hasn't revved to that. Maybe they'll catch up with the M3s and everything, but for most people, this doesn't matter because you're not running benchmarks all day. You're just browsing the web. It's perfectly fine. And what more people care about are things like reliability and maybe Apple's, the ones they're choosing to do better in that area. Who knows? But Apple does have to keep up here. And it's kind of like the camera. It's like once it starts catching on and people start poking into it, it just becomes a thing. And hopefully now, if Apple is paying attention, they will feel, I don't think it's going to be like the camera. The camera, they're going to feel the need to do better with the camera because it was such a big story everywhere. But with the SSDs, they'll probably be like, a few people complain, but no one really cares. But I do hope they keep up, because it is something that does impact your day-to-day experience, whether you know it or not. You might not notice from one computer to the next, but if you skip like 3 computers and you're like, they both have an SSD, but the SSDs are so much faster than they were 5-10 years ago, and that needs to continue to be the case.
Additionally, and unrelatedly, there's apparently going to be a 15-inch MacBook thing, according to Ming-Chi Kuo. 15-inch MacBook could feature M2 and M2 Pro options without the Air brand. And there's been a lot of debates whether or not my beloved 12-inch would come back or not. Nobody seems to agree at this time. But apparently there may be a 15-inch that is not a Pro, which is interesting. And not an Air either, just a 15-inch MacBook Studio? I don't know. I mean, what this would end up being.
Possible. I don't think Studio would be the name, because Studio is effectively like Pro Plus in their nomenclature so far. Yep. Or maybe, I don't know, it's like mid-range Pro. But so take with a grain of salt anything from the rumor mill that's about pricing, naming, or marketing. The Apple marketing team basically does not leak. Like the only times we've really gotten credible leaks from for things like product names usually is when we have like accidental inclusion in Apple's own software releases of references to a certain name or something like that. Like Apple leaks it.
How did Mac Studio leak? Remember when Mac Studio leaked like a few days before? I don't remember where they came from.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it was with one of those like Twitter people. Anyway, it's very unlikely that this product that is scheduled to come out not exactly soon, that the name of it would leak. So I wouldn't get too bogged down in the name. What does seem, likely and credible here is that some kind of 15-inch non-Pro MacBook is coming out. I think there's a big potential market for this. If you look at what Apple's doing with the iPhone, there is a similar rumor with the iPhone this fall.
That's not a rumor. That's basically guaranteed.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
Because the phone stuff does leak.
Yeah, the phone stuff leaks like crazy. And so this fall, if this is correct, the non-Pro phone is going to come in 2 sizes. Previously, it has not been possible to get the largest size class of phone in a non-Pro line. But this fall, they are changing that, because turns out there's a big market for big phones, even if that market doesn't necessarily include everybody who's willing to spend $1,200 on a phone. So that makes sense for them to cover that market. Well, the same thing applies to laptops. size of the screen does not need to correlate with all of the Pro components inside. Many people want larger screen laptops, and Apple has covered the 13-inch range extremely well for years, and I'm pretty sure that is the number one range in terms of like what volume sells across the whole industry. I think 13-inch is probably the most common one, but probably, but I would imagine second place is 15-inch. For years, Apple covered that very, very well. I think what's interesting, though, is that when you look at the recent products, and this applies across many Apple product lines, possibly all Apple product lines, the word Pro used to just mean the bigger ones. But in recent years, Pro has actually been pushed further up market. In some ways, that's just Apple wanting to, keep their extremely healthy profit margins, and, hey, that's how they got where they are, good for them. But in other ways, it allows them to use actually fancier and more expensive components and materials and stuff like that. And so what I think we're seeing is the bifurcation of more and more Apple product lines into much more distinguished Pro versus non-Pro than we used to have. If you look at the MacBook Pro now has these much larger, higher core count chips. We have things like the ProMotion displays, HDR, like being built on the display, stuff like that. Like those are much higher end components and needs most people don't care about. Look at the phones. You have the 3-camera system, all like the Pro RAW stuff. You have the fancy materials that I hate. The ProMotion display again there too. Like this is a more expensive thing. So I think what they're doing is breaking this long-held notion, and in a much larger way, breaking this long-held notion that Pro just meant the biggest ones, and offering non-Pro big options in their product lines, because there's demand for that, and letting Pro actually mean the higher end of components, most of which happen to be on the bigger scale, but not just the biggest ones.
Yeah, I feel like this is long overdue, especially since, whether they call it an Air or not, a 15-inch MacBook Air-ish type computer with sort of MacBook Air internals is such a great machine for people who want a bigger screen, because remember, it's still got the Air internals. It doesn't have Pro internals, no super hot anything. It's just like the same little power sipping thing that's in the 13-inch, but so much more room for battery. And yes, you have a bigger screen to power too, but that screen's not going to be a 1600 nit HDR, like whatever. It's a bigger screen, but I feel like the battery increase will more than make up for the screen increase. So what you get for the people who want it is a thing with a bigger screen, which people really want either for the real estate or so they can do a scale resolution to make everything bigger on their screen, right? And you get better battery life. And it's only a little bit bigger and only a little bit heavier. And that's a trade-off that tons of people are willing to make. Like we're so used to it, but like it must be so weird if you're shopping for a laptop in the traditional Apple world of the past decade or so and saying, I want a laptop. Oh, this screen's a little big. Can you show me something with a bigger screen? And you're like, it costs how much? You were just looking at the $999 MacBook Air with a 13-inch screen. You just want something with a little bit bigger screen. It's like, yeah, that'll be, add $2,500 to the price of your thing. It doesn't make any sense to the consumer. Like, but the screen is only a little bit bigger. And they're like, yeah, it's got this and that and the other thing in it. And they're like, but I don't know what any of that is. And I don't care about it. I just need a laptop that I can browse the web on and write things in Microsoft Word. I just want a little bit bigger screen. And you're telling me my only option is this monstrosity that I don't understand? This thing needs to be here. Now, Apple could be scared of doing it, like, oh no, it's going to cannibalize our 16-inch sales. But honestly, no one is cross-shopping. Like, I was looking at it at the bottom-of-the-line MacBook Air, but to get that bigger screen, I decided to pay a few $1,000 more. Like, I don't think that's something that happens very often, right? So this machine has to exist, and that's what they're doing with the phones too. It's just so much more pleasing and symmetrical. It makes so much more sense for market segmentation. And it allows you to make this machine, which will have slightly different trade-offs than the base Air or than any of the larger Pros. And most of those trade-offs are going to be in favor of things that people want. More battery life, bigger things on the screen, or room for more stuff for not much bigger size. And that's why I really hope that this thing, like I'm rooting for basically a 15-inch MacBook Air. Whether they call it that or not, I'm rooting for it to stick to the lowest power components that Apple ships, because the M1 is plenty good. The M2 is going to be plenty good. That's all people need. Don't try to put a Pro in there. I guess you could offer it if you wanted to, but I feel like the best version of this machine is MacBook Air guts, 15-inch screen, bigger battery. That is the machine that really hits the sweet spot of people who don't care about Pro stuff, and they'll love that thing because, the Airs get such great battery life as it is. Can you imagine an Air with even more battery life and a bigger screen? That's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this would sell a lot.
I strongly agree. Although I do think that there is potentially an appetite for an in-betweener between, or I guess this would be bigger than the big Pro. No. Well, we've got 14 and 16 inch Pros now. Gosh.
Yeah, let's the Pros be like, well, it's not 15, it's 16. I mean, that little bit of differentiation. Oh, and by the way, it's also ProMotion 1600 nit. Like the gap between Apple's Pro laptop screens and its non-Pro laptop screens has never been bigger. Like those Pro laptop screens are amazing. And the MacBook Air screen, it's fine, but it's not even in the same league in terms of features that it's missing and things it can't do.
I don't know. I still, even though I don't think it has a place in my life anymore, I still feel like I want a 12-inch MacBook with Apple Silicon internals. Because, again, I loved that machine, but it was kind of a piece of trash when it was brand new. It was slow. Kind of. It was shush. It was delightful, and it was also terrible.
What people loved about it, the physical side of it, is so achievable with Apple Silicon today.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was driving at, is that it would presumably, in the same way that my 14-inch MacBook Pro feels like, I mean, it's not literally, but it feels like my iMac Pro, yet portable. Well, the Phantom 12-inch, like M1 or M2 MacBook could be a Intel 12-inch MacBook, but not crappy. I'm a little concerned about the keyboard in terms of, could they make a scissor switch keyboard that's super thin, or maybe they just make it a little thicker than the old one was, but it's spiritually a successor. I don't know. I love that machine so much, and I really think it could be a really, really great seller for someone who wants a very small, very portable thing that isn't an iPad. And granted, iPad OS is allegedly getting much better and is allegedly going to have more Pro apps coming soon. But I don't know. When I bought the MacBook, I wanted an iPad that wasn't an iPad, basically. And in a lot of ways, that's what I got, except it was slow and couldn't do anything. But so I guess in that way it was like an iPad. Hey-o! But I don't know. I miss that machine, and I kind of wish it would come back, even though I don't know that I would buy one. It's
the same team that makes the iPhone Mini, right? Because it's the smallest line, the smallest device in a line that has people who really want it, but doesn't really sell that well, but people who want it small don't have any alternatives. I mean, obviously, if I think they should just make it straight up. Like, I think it would be a perfectly fine, straightforward computer. And yeah, it would sell fewer than the other models, but I think that's fine. I think Apple can absorb that, right? But if they don't want to do that, if I had to motivate Apple to say, oh, you should really offer this product, and they say, yeah, we're not into the just plain old 12-inch laptop, even if we can make it really thin, we did that and we weren't into it, I would say, this is a perfect opportunity to get over your reticence to make a touchscreen Mac, because make it a convertible thing. It already runs iPad apps, for crying out loud. Make it something that you can fold over backwards and turn into basically a 12-inch iPad when you need it to be an iPad, and a touchscreen Mac when you need it to be a Mac. And it's running macOS the whole time, and you can just run iPad apps on it. Like, I know Apple doesn't want to make this machine, but the 12-inch form factor is the perfect opportunity to do that, because you wouldn't want to turn a 16-inch MacBook Pro into an iPad. That's a pretty heavy iPad. But the 12-inch one, that's already in. We already make iPads that size. You could make it a similar thickness. Tons of other people in the industry are doing this. I know they don't want to make macOS touchscreen or whatever, but I feel like Apple can't stay away from this forever. And the 12-inch size is the perfect place for them to dip their toe in. I'm not predicting this. There are no rumors of this. That's the way I would pitch it as, aren't you more interested in this product now if you weren't interested in a plain old 12-inch laptop? But according to the rumors, it seemed like they might just make potentially a 12-inch laptop, which would be fine as well. But I just feel like it's a less exciting machine than a convertible.
Frankly, I think people would love that thing, convertible or not. I think, you said it's a less exciting machine, and that's true in the sense of what we talk about on podcasts, but in actual day-to-day use, that machine, if just a modern 11 or 12-inch MacBook Air with the Apple architecture and the good current keyboard that we have, that would be an incredibly fun, awesome computer that I think a ton of people would love. And yeah, granted, the reason why, my speculation on the reason why the 12-inch didn't really sell that well once the 13-inch Air came out is simply that if you're looking for something for your only computer, you generally don't want to get the tiniest screen you can get. Usually you want something mid-size. That's why 13-inch and 15-inch laptops sell so well. Because if you're only going to have one computer and one screen, a 13-inch or 15-inch laptop is probably what you want most of the time. So I get that. But to have this computer as an option in the lineup what you capture with that is people who maybe have a desktop as their main computer and want something as small and light as possible for when they travel. Maybe people who fly a lot, because using anything bigger on an airline tray table is cumbersome at best, if it's even possible. Once that person leans their chair back like a jerk, you can't do anything on any computer except something this size. Like, this is your only option. But it's all the people who absolutely loved the old 11-inch MacBook Air, and then who tolerated the 12-inch when it came out. That is a market. That is a market worth serving. I would speculate that market is probably even bigger than the market for many of the Macs they do happily sell in the lineup. I'm guessing, for instance, that market is probably bigger than the market for, say, the Mac Studio. Maybe even the Mac, the Mac Pro, probably. The
Mac Mini. Any Mac that doesn't have a screen on it. All the laptops sell more than that, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think there is very much a market for this. And yeah, it's not going to replace the volume that the 13-inch Air does. It doesn't need to. It's a different computer for a different purpose for different people. But I hope that someday they do find a way to offer that, because I think that would be very well received by more people than you might expect, unless they totally fumble it again and make something crappy again. But I don't think they would. I think they've shown their current direction is good. Their current team making product decisions is good. They really haven't had a lot of fumbles recently, except maybe like the Studio Display camera and the Mac Studio fan. Other than that, and this new M2 MacBook Pro, which that's its own flat, thin box of worms. But I would trust them to do a really good job with making a new, modern 12 or 11-inch MacBook Air with their current sensibilities and current hardware abilities. I think they would do a really nice job, and I hope they do.
I got another way to make this more exciting. Again, not that the regular 12-inch is boring or anything, but if someone was balking at a decision-making and saying, that doesn't seem like it. Another way to make it exciting, if you don't want to do it in convertible, this machine is also the perfect opportunity to finally explore materials other than aluminum. Aluminum has been great, served us well. It has lots of strengths. It also has some weaknesses. Many, many years there have been rumors about Apple experimenting with different materials to make their laptops out of, and obviously those different materials have their own sets of trade-offs. But I think a 12-inch would be a great place to experiment with a material that shores up aluminum's two weaknesses. One, weight, which obviously aluminum is really lightweight, but there are things that are lighter. And two, aluminum bends and dents, and things like plastics and carbon fiber are more resistant to permanently bending or denting than aluminum is. So if one of those materials, if there are many, many years of experimenting with different materials to make laptops out of it, if there's a top contender, it would be great to do it on a 12-inch, because not only would it be so much smaller than everything else, it would be so incredibly light and so incredibly durable. And even if it's just a plain old straight-up laptop with no convertibles and no touchscreen or anything like that, but it's a laptop that's lighter than you could ever imagine. And look how durable it is. You can put it in your backpack without a case and drop your backpack on the ground like my kids do all the time, and it will just bend and flex and bounce back instead of denting or chipping or shattering. I'm always on the lookout for the next leap in laptop technology, because glass and aluminum is great. It's the best laptops have ever been, but there is a next step somewhere out there, and I hope Apple finds it.
Also, this would be a great opportunity to launch cellular Macs.
Oh, don't. Can you imagine?
They can do that at any time. They don't need to.
I know.
That's not something that's anytime now. It's in iPads, same stupid chip. All right.
Can you imagine how much I would lose my mind if they came out with what is effectively a not crappy 12-inch MacBook that actually had cellular? I'm already having very inappropriate thoughts about this computer.
You have to wait for Apple's cell chips to come out to do that, right?
Yeah,
that's the current rumors. The reason not doing it is because they're waiting to do it with their own cell chips, which they are making, but they're making them for the phones. But why can't the iPads have had them since day one? That's 12 years ago. They've had them for 12 years. They don't want to pay Qualcomm. Whatever the excuses are. There's not a big enough market. Nobody cares about it. I don't know what they're thinking, but we want cellular in our laptops. Apple, get on that eventually.
Can you imagine? That would be like Casey Christmas. It would be like when the Mac Pro came out and it was John Christmas. This would be like Casey Christmas.
Yes,
a black carbon fiber 12-inch with cellular.
Oh, stop! Stop! Oh God! Oh, if it was black too. Oh, this is my dreams come true. How many episodes of ATP did we have to go on about the stupid Mac Pro?
But the 50? Mac Pro is a real computer. We're just these are things that are probably.
Excuse me. You went on about the Mac Pro for 30 episodes before it was even real. Don't even start. You owe me at least 30.
It was real. They pre-announced it in like April of 2014 or whatever the hell it was.
Whatever.
About it for years. And even now, they even pre-announced the new one. They're like, the Mac Pro, we'll talk about that later. And so now,
you owe me easily 30 episodes.
Apple has not pre-announced the black 12-inch laptop.
No, but you probably owe me 10 just on the theory, or not even theory, on the hope that such a thing would ever exist.
Why don't you just draw some fan art? Maybe that'll make Apple make it.
We are sponsored this week by Linode. Visit linode.com/ATP and see why Linode has been voted the top infrastructure as a service provider by both G2 and TrustRadius. Linode is my favorite place to run servers, and I run a bunch of servers. And the reason I go to Linode is, I've used a lot of these hosts in my career so far, and I've stuck with Linode the longest, and I've been with them now for almost a decade. And the reason why is that they just offer incredible resources, incredible performance, and incredible features, and increasingly incredible managed services for prices that are incredibly low. Like, I can't believe what they're able to offer for the price, and consistently over time. As technology gets better, they even offer more for the money, and they just make it so great to be a customer. They have all these APIs and integrations and dashboards and everything. Everything is super easy and nice to use. They have great support if you ever need it. I've used a lot of these hosts. A lot of times the support is, let's say, nothing to write home about. Linode, on the other hand, is great. Every single time I've come up with something in the support ticket, they've always responded very well, and you don't have to get bounced around to different people. They always are right there, like right at the very first response. So it's just an amazing host, great power to performance ratio, great resource levels, great capabilities. They also now have a new managed database offering. They're doing MySQL is already out. MongoDB and Postgres, I believe, are out shortly. Redis is coming later this year. This is simple, reliable, managed databases. High-performance database clusters. These are managed databases, so you can quickly deploy new databases, and they take care of all sorts of managing tasks for them, things like replication, recovery, backups. That's all managed with these services. So you get simple, fast deployment, flexible plans, secure access. It's just a great service. One of many at Linode. So visit linode.com/ATP, create a free account there, and you get $100 in credit. Once again, linode.com/ATP. New accounts get $100 in credit. Thank you so much to Linode for sponsoring our show.
All right, let's do some Ask ATP. And Elijah Yup writes, I was fortunate to attend WWDC 22 as a Swift student challenger, and I just listened to your WWDC show. John quipped that for non-press folks, what happened was not WWDC, but Apple Park tourism. I'm curious what he felt had changed. I'd heard WWDC meant meeting the developer community and having direct conversations with Apple engineers, and I'm glad to say that both were abundant this year. So what the heck, John?
So what actually happens at WWDC in the old style is you go to sessions and you sit in a room and someone gets up on stage and does a live performance of kind of like those things you're seeing on the video. And during that, you're sitting in an audience next to other developers, some of which you may know, some of which you may not, so that there's an interaction that you can have there with your neighbors talking about things that you're seeing. When the thing is over, it is possible in many cases to go up and talk to the person who just gave that presentation to ask them a question or two. And then you go out into the hall where other people who went to see other sessions are milling about and talk to them about what they saw as you're on your way to your other session. Like that, all that experience isn't there when you're sitting around watching a video with somebody. You can't talk to the people in the video about it. Everyone's watching the same thing. There's not multiple tracks, right? You're not interacting. You're not forced, but like you're not constantly bumping into other developers and talking to them about stuff and forming social groups and like going to lunch with them and talking about the sessions. What sessions did you go? What sessions did you go to? Again, I'm not saying that that's the reason the current thing is bad. It's just different, right? And so when I say, what you got is, you go there in person, you kind of Apple Park tourism, you're just physically not doing the same things that you do at normal WWDC. You're not going from session to session, watching things, talking to people. It's just different, right? Now you do get to interact with Apple people. There was no Slack in the old one, so you couldn't ask questions. How many people could, who are you actually sitting next to? How many people actually went to the front of the room? Like, there's obviously limited bandwidth. Is the reason the new approach is better overall, but it is different. So when I say what happened wasn't WWDC, I mean what happened wasn't what used to happen at the old in-person WWDC. It was very different. That one day or whatever it is, 1 or 2 days of touring the fitness center and seeing a big video on the screen with everybody, it's much more like going to the keynote, but less like going to a normal day of WWDC where you're picking which sessions you're going to go to and sitting next to people and talking with your friends who went to different sessions.
And don't even forget, all the community events, like, when we recorded live and the talk show live, which I guess, happened to a degree this year.
If you're one of the lucky 180 people that fit in that room.
Well, still, I mean, it's still a thing. And then there was like Layers that was across the street, and AltConf that was often nearby. You know,
No, I mean, like in the new thing, the theater, the Gruber had to talk to 180 people as opposed to like 2,000 or whatever the old theater held. You know what I mean?
But that's my point, right? Is that, you know, talk show is different, but, you know, you didn't see us, or I almost said performing, which I guess is true, but recording live. And you didn't see, you know, any of the relay shows recording live. You know, you typically would see Connected having a live episode. And so there's so much community stuff that happened around WWDC. So even if you weren't going to WWDC proper, it was still a fairly enjoyable time to just go and hang out with everyone, especially in San Jose, because there were like 2 decent places to hang out. So,
now there's
so
one.
it wasn't hard. Yeah, now there's just one. But anyways, no, that is very helpful. Thank you, John. Wade Tregaskis writes, I just listened to episode 50 of the Relay FM crossover podcast, the iMac Pro, with Marco Arment and Jason Snell, and was startled to hear Marco describe the then situation as, quote, an embarrassment of riches, quote, in light of the release of the iMac Pro and the promise of a real new second coming Mac Pro. It also reminded me that it's been over 5 years since Apple's little public come to Jesus moment with the trash can and the Mac Pros. I'm curious how Marco feels about all that in hindsight. Are we now living in a gilded age for Macintosh professionals, or was it more of a case of a reality distortion than reality? I suppose the timing is perfectly imperfect. Next week is WWDC week, as Wade wrote this, and it marks the climax of Apple's about 2 years promise for the ARM transition. Will we see a new Mac Pro? Will it be everything we hope for? Will we achieve the coveted 3 out of 3 ATP hosts own it award? Please make your prediction. So I guess that's all unnecessary. So you can cut that, Marco. Hey, buddy.
Oh, I left that in there on purpose because, yeah, this is an older question or whatever, but this is what people were thinking before WWDC. Obviously, no Mac Pro at WWDC, so the question still stands.
Yeah, so I predict at WWDC that we will get the reveal of the Mac Pro. They will definitely tell us what it is. They'll detail it, and it'll be available to order later this year. Whoops.
Totally.
Yeah, I think you already did say that on the episode, and I said I was doubtful. So I'll gather my being right points for that now.
Yeah, you've earned it. All right, so in this case, looking at the question here, are we now living in a gilded age for Mac Pros? And Pro here was lowercase, or was it more of a case of reality distortion than reality back then? So this is, at the time of the iMac Pro's launch, when that was out and it was great, and I got one, and so did Casey later, and it was amazing. John should have gotten one, but never did.
Concur.
And lots of our friends got them, and they were great. At that time, I stand by that statement. Now, I think we have even more of an embarrassment of riches in the Mac Pro area, and lowercase p there, but it's different, and we're in a transitional period. So it's hard to say for sure, just because we haven't seen the Apple Silicon Mac Pro yet. So we don't know how high these specs go. We don't know how well this thing scales. We don't know what we get with the highest end model. Like, are we going to get?
Did they trash can it? We don't know if they trash canned it.
What?
Like, are we getting another Mac Pro where they totally miscalculate what they should be building? Right.
Right. Exactly.
No.
So, there's a lot of unknowns there, and this is a transitional period. So it's hard to say for sure at the very highest end, but I think we still do have the situation where we have an embarrassment of riches in the high-end Mac line, because now you have so many different options that all give us really great performance, and what most Pro Mac users want is now available in laptops and in desktops. And there's very few trade-offs between those two. My needs could really, honestly, if I got one of the new M2 MacBook Airs with 24 gigs of RAM, maxing that out to 24, I could get away with that most of the time. Now, granted, I want more RAM. I think I have, 64 in this thing?
I think that's right.
Yeah, 64. So, but when I had 16 when I was using the M1 MacBook Air and then later M1 Mac Mini as my main desktop, I had 16 for like a year, and I felt it, but the rest of it was good enough. It was compelling to keep using it that way. So going from 16 to 24 would certainly be welcome. Having more would be great, but honestly, with that one exception of like more RAM being nicer to have, I could do all of my work on a MacBook Air plugged into a giant monitor like that, which is what I did, and it was great. And almost every person I know who used to buy the big tower Macs, usually Mac Pros, or before that, like G5s. Almost everyone I know, almost every job that needed those, or almost every hobbyist who wanted those, almost all of them no longer need what is currently called the Mac Pro. Almost all those needs for most of those people are satisfied now by laptops, and in some cases, even the lowest end laptops they now sell. That's amazing. And it's only the very, very narrow niche of specialized needs and John who are still buying the Mac Pro.
I'm over here. I just added another giant MPX card. I put the Radeon Pro Vega 2 inside my Mac Pro. So now I literally have I have the giant W5700X whatever that takes up like 4 slots or whatever, and then I have the second, the Pro Vega 2 in there. I was going to put the 580X in as well, but I realized it doesn't fit. Like you can't put a third video card in there because there are PCI slots for it, but the brackets don't let you put it in there. I guess it can't deliver the power to it. So yeah, here I am stuffing my gigantic tower computer with way more GPU than I can ever possibly use. But that is not a market that Apple is targeting with any of its current computers, except the 2019 Mac Pro that I'm using. When they come out with the new Mac Pro, we'll see what they've decided to target after that. But that's the beauty of everything you're saying, that the lineup is so great for pretty much everybody. And also, Apple has said that they're also going to make a ridiculous computer that almost nobody should buy. Like, they're not even saying, oh, we're not going to make that. They're saying, you get all these great computers that fill all these needs. You get everything you ever want. And even if you're one of these ridiculous people who wants this big monster computer, we're going to make one of those too. And who knows what that's going to look like. And that'll be fun, right? So I think they're doing so much better than they were. Like, they obviously from the outside, it's hard for us to see this, but when they made that promise, we're going to do this thing, we're going to turn everything around, they have. It's taken a long time. It's taken longer than we wanted. And we lost faith a lot because on the outside, we can't see the progress. But look at the machines they released. They eventually figured out what they should be doing with their Mac products from top to bottom, not just the Pro ones where they figured out they need more ports and everything. But I think, MagSafe on the MacBook M2 MacBook Air, right? They're doing it right. So, again, with a few exceptions like the weird 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro, the fans on the Mac Studio, but and the camera on the Studio Display. But hey, the fact that the Studio Display exists, right? That's a big victory with one tiny step back with the camera. And Apple's camera has always been crap, and it's a lesson they haven't quite learned yet. But yeah, this is the best the Mac lineup has been in ages. And so I think, 2 thumbs up for me. And we'll see if they trash can the Mac Pro. But
well, and at this point though, the Mac Studio covers even more of the needs that were not already being met by the MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini and the MacBook Air. They cover so much of so many people's needs already with all of the other products that pretty much the only needs that are still left at the top end for an Apple Silicon Mac Pro. So if you're throwing out Windows gaming, because that's going to be Apple Silicon, so there's no more Windows gaming, John. So if you're throwing that out, the needs that are left up there are basically cards, very high RAM needs, and very high GPU needs. And those aren't zero markets. Those are markets with people in them, but it's just getting more and more narrow and more specialized to people who actually need this product. And so many more of us are now being served very well by all the other products.
I think it's also top-end video stuff, right? Because we don't know what's going to be in the Mac Pro, but presumably it will do everything that takes a long time in Final Cut Pro faster than even a top-end Mac Studio, right? So
that's like the high-end GPU performance, basically.
Yeah, because Apple wants to sell this, if part of your job is every day waiting for crap to come out of Final Cut Pro, if we get you a computer that does that 50% faster, you're willing to pay through the nose for it. That historically has been a big market for Apple's ridiculous machines. And so even if they do trash can it and it looks like a slightly bigger Mac Studio and has no slots, if it does Final Cut Pro stuff faster than a Mac Studio with an Ultra, that's a valuable machine to a lot of people, and I think they will sell them for whatever ridiculous price they charge.
Yeah, I think something that Marco said earlier is important in that at the time in which we were saying, or Marco was saying, this is the golden age, I think that was true compared to the absolute slog that we were all going through the years prior with the crappy keyboards and the jump to USB-C before I think anyone was really ready for it. And at that point, the iMac Pro really was just amazing, and it was a cold glass of ice water when we were all in what seemed like hell. But looking at it with today's point of view, where things have gotten so much better since then yeah, it does look like a reality distortion field in retrospect. But when we were there, we could say on an infinite timeline, it would all be so much better than it is today, but look at how great it is now. And that infinite timeline turned out to be how many years ago was the iMac Pro? Like 4 or 5 years? It only took a handful of years for Apple to really get their story straight. So I think I think it was both the Gilded Age at the time and reality distortion in retrospect. Dave Ayton writes, John has sung the praises of ZFS many times in the past. How close is APFS to providing all the features he likes in ZFS, and what is APFS missing?
It's missing so many things. I will have a link in the show notes to the Wikipedia page listing the ZFS features, but so many of them I had forgotten about. Like, ZFS does so much cool stuff at a fairly high price, but I still kind of miss a bunch of them. So the big one that I was hammering on when APFS came out that I still think is important is data integrity. ZFS can do checksums not just on metadata, but also on every piece of data. So you can know if you have any kind of bit rot or any kind of errors anyplace else in your system that are causing bits to be flipped when data is moved around, which is great. And that is super important if you care about your data. There is a cost to doing that, obviously. But as computers get faster and faster, that cost becomes lower and lower percentage-wise, given the total amount of compute available. And I really wish that APFS did that. And it could be added to APFS at some point in the future. I forget. I delved into this when APFS was released. I'm not sure if there's an option to do it, or it could be done very easily, but they didn't do it. But anyway, it's an important feature of ZFS. ZFS has features on top of that in terms of data integrity, where it can keep multiple copies of data around. And then if it finds an error, if it's got multiple copies of the data that it found an error in, it could fix that error, and it's sort of self-healing type of thing because you just tell it. Where is that feature listed on here? You could kind of say, like, how many copies do you want it to keep, and where do you want it to keep them, and do you want me to automatically self-heal? It's really great about sort of being the caretaker of your bits, rather than just saying, well, I wrote the bits, and I'm assuming they're going to be the same when I read them back later, right? There's a bunch of transactional stuff with rollbacks and everything. There's the smart snapshot diffs. So if you do a snapshot and you just want to transfer the diffs of that snapshot efficiently to another thing, that would be great for Time Machine. Again, APFS has a similar feature, but the ZFS one is a little bit fancier. What else is on this list that's interesting? There's a bunch more things that are tunable about it in terms of how it lays out data and how it uses caching that are mostly of interest to enterprise scenarios. Obviously, this is the big thing where it does essentially software RAID of just combining multiple disks into giant volumes. APFS does something like that on a smaller scale. APFS is more appropriate for Apple's use case. Because remember, APFS debuted not on the Mac, but on phones, right? And it debuted without people even knowing, where it converted all our phones to APFS and then rolled it back without us knowing, and they told us about it later. One of the greatest technical feats ever. The team that did that should get some sort of award. And Apple, like, what a dangerous thing to do. How many billions of iPhone users do we have?
So true.
When they do a point update, we're going to do what? You're going to convert their volume to a different format and then roll it back. Okay. And you're going to tell anybody about this? No, the update will just take a little bit longer. So amazing. And they did it on the phone first instead of doing it on the Mac first, which seemed like it would be easier if you do it on the Mac first. If you screw it up, who cares? You hose a bunch of Mac users, not the billions of iPhone users. So APFS has the features that Apple needs it to have, and not many more. And it took a long time for them to build this thing in-house to do that. But ZFS has so many features and is so capable. And it's probably not particularly well tuned to run on a phone, given its RAM requirements and its CPU requirements, but it does have way more features. One of the analogies I heard way back when was, in terms of file systems, that ZFS is a little bit like a minivan. It can carry a lot of people. It can do a lot of things. It has a lot of features. The seats fold into the floor. It's got 20 cup holders. It's got 7 screens. It's got tons of stuff in it. And what Apple needs is a Ferrari. If it's 2 people, it goes real fast.
All right. Thanks to our sponsors this week, Linode, Locket, and Trade Coffee. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join. And we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech Podcast.
There is an item in the document that said, Casey impulse bought a computer. I have to know what this is.
I have known you since we were 10 or something like that. So it's been literally 30
while.
years or thereabouts. This is, I think, the closest to pulling a Marco I've been in a while. It only took 30 years.
Wait, in all fairness, I have very rarely impulse bought a computer.
I don't think Marco could identify his impulses anymore. You know what an impulse is, Marco? I don't impulse buy a computer. I just decide to buy one and buy it. That's not an impulse. Wait. What is an impulse? What do you mean?
I don't even know. I don't even know where to go from here. Anyways, yeah. So this was, let me see. It was Thursday. So it was last Thursday. I noticed that, I forget what genesis of this issue was, but what I ended up noticing, however, one way or another, was that my Mac Mini wasn't responding to incoming network requests. Now, to back up a half step, so I have a Mac Mini. It's a sometime in 2012. So at this point, it is literally 10 years old. It was gifted to me by our friends at Mac Mini Colo, or what is it, Mac Stadium now, I believe. No, is that right? Yes, that's right. I think
they merged.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it is. But anyways, they're great people. I think they've sponsored in the past. I don't believe they're sponsoring in the future, but genuinely, they're great people there. And they gave me, they sent me this for free. It's a 10-year-old one that had a 256 gig SSD that they had put in it. And they had, retired it, and somehow or another it ended up in my hands. And I was using this pretty much exclusively as a Plex and Channels server. Channels is the thing that sponsored probably a year or two back that lets you use an HD home run and a over-the-air antenna to record things, or TV everywhere to record things. Look into it at getchannels.com if you're interested. They have not sponsored this, but it's great stuff. And one of the founders is a friend of mine. So anyway, I use it for Plex and Channels and a handful of other small things. I did use it actually for Xcode bots when that was still a thing, but that just got deprecated as well. But one way or another, I do use it, and in my world, and you can snicker and laugh all you want, but in my world, Plex, and to a lesser degree Channels, are an important part of my world. I think all of us have understood this at this point. Like, Plex is important to me. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. And it's important to the rest of the family too, because that's how, on the rare occasions that Erin is watching TV without me, she'll watch TV typically via Plex. The kids get a little bit of TV time in the afternoons, and they'll do that on Plex. So it's important to all of us, not just me. And I found that the Mac Mini was not responding to incoming network requests. I could still do anything I wanted on the internet if I can get onto the Mini, if I actually hook up a display and hook up a keyboard and so on and so forth. But I couldn't get any incoming network requests. And I'm just troubleshooting, I'm rebooting, I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. I couldn't figure it out. And I realized that on Wi-Fi, everything was working. Incoming network requests were working fine, but if I use the Ethernet IP, it wasn't working. Very long story. Well, already very long story, slightly shortened. It was one of two things that seemed to have fixed it. It was either an NVRAM reset, or it was a new version of Tailscale, which might be a future sponsor. I don't remember, but something might have gotten misconfigured on my end. User error, I mean, and something might have gotten hosed up there. But one way or another, it seemed I did eventually get it fixed. But I have it's like a hard drive that has started ticking. I have now lost confidence in the machine.
Yep.
And on even beyond that, I'm starting to occasionally acquire 4K content from time to time, and a 10-year-old Mac Mini does not do well with even direct playing 4K content. Like, even that didn't always go well, much less trying to transcode it on the fly. So on Thursday evening, within about a half an hour of the cutoff, in order to receive a Mini with $8 fast shipping Friday evening, I ordered a refurb Mac Mini. An M1 Mac Mini. And I did this for a handful of reasons. First of all, because at the time in which I ordered it, it was not, the Intel one was not yet repaired. And so I wanted as little downtime as possible. And I was able to find a refurb that had the exact configuration I wanted, which was extremely surprising and pretty awesome. And I wanted to get it the next day. And fast shipping said I could do that. But also, it occurred to me, I thought buying a Mac Mini was going to be in my future, but eventually, like maybe when the M2 Mac Minis come out. But it occurred to me there's not that much different, leaving aside, what will inevitably be like a radical hardware change, like a radical industrial design change. But
does that ever happen to the Mac Mini?
Well, no, but they're saying maybe this is the time. It's the year of Linux on the desktop and a new industrial design for Mac Mini.
And by radical, you mean it gets slightly thinner again.
Right, exactly.
Now available in Starlight.
Man, I'd rock a blue Mac Mini or something like that. Anyways, so it occurred to me, looking at the M2 that is now freshly out, it's not really that different than the M1. Like, there are differences for sure, but it's not night and day different. And yes, I am aware that there's like a little bit more that with regard to transcoding that actually would have been helpful in this particular use case. But I figured, you know what? Let me just order it. In worst case, I'll just not open it and return it. Who am I kidding? Of course I opened it.
Yeah, you can still return it.
I know, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's a different conversation.
I ordered it on a Thursday night. It was supposed to come Friday. I paid the $8 shipping, so it would come Friday. It came Monday, which I really want to complain and moan about. But in these unprecedented times, I'm trying to bite my tongue. And so I set it up, I guess it was Monday night, and it took me a few tries to get Plex migrated over properly. But channels went immediately. It took absolutely no effort to get channels working, but Plex was considerably more fiddly because Plex. And so I eventually did get it working, and now it is up and running, and I have a new M1 Mac Mini home server, and I'm extremely pleased with this so far. It's gone real well.
You did a very exciting upgrade to the most boring computer you have in your house.
Right? That's pretty accurate. That's not entirely true. I do have a Raspberry Pi 4 that it couldn't really be upgraded in any reasonable way. But that is arguably the most boring. Or maybe the two Raspberry Pi Ws that are serving as my garage door notification system. Those might be more boring. But I take your point. I'm arguing to be a turd, but I take your point, and you are correct.
The Mac Mini is also the perfect computer in your house to buy refurb, right? Because it's just it sits there. It just does a very simple task. The number of things it's ever asked to do is very small, and as long as it can do them, it's fine. And they cost so much money when you buy them new relative to sort of the excitement. Like it's kind of like your Synology, well, not like your Synology, like most people's Synologies, in that you don't expect to even see or hear it. It just exists ambiently as infrastructure in your house, and it just needs to be there, right? So that the Mac Mini is not the type of machine that you would get in Starlight and be excited about it, because you're just using it to serve your needs, and your main interface with it is not even in the same room as it.
Right. Yeah. And the Mac Mini is actually sitting physically on top of the Synology right now. Although
you do have some problems about computer placement in your house.
Yes. Well, there's that.
You should run some wire.
It's funny you bring that up because I put that.
What's going on with that project?
He did the project.
I put that aside for the time being because I can't decide what I want to do is what it really boils down to.
I thought there was a problem with the Historical Commission.
No, not really. I think so. What I really need to do is I need to price out both fiber, which I'm still thinking about, and Cat 6 or what have you.
The new project is thinking about playing the project.
Right. Yes.
Right. We got past the talking stage. Now we're at the thinking stage.
Yeah, exactly right. All kidding aside, what I really want to do is I want to get the price list or the parts list and the pricing, because if fiber really is similar money, which I spent a lot of time on the show saying it was, just because I put my thumb in the air and that's what it felt like. But once I start getting down to brass tacks, I'm not so sure that I'm correct about that. So what I want to do is I want to price out, is fiber really similar money? And if it is, I'll probably go that route. But if it's like, 2x or something like that, which it could be, then I'll probably just go to Cat 6 and be done with it. To go back just very quickly, I suppose people will potentially ask. The refurb I got is a M1 Mac Mini with 16 gigs RAM, a 0.5 terabyte hard drive. But I really wanted to, because of this very project, actually, here's your tie-in. I really wanted the 10 gig Ethernet. This is the only 10 gig Ethernet device in the entire house right now, but I wanted to future-proof. And my thought is it might be nice for communication with the Synology, because I could hypothetically put a 10 gig card in the Synology, or realistically, that's on the list of things I really need to upgrade, because it's also also a decade old. Anyways, I wanted to future-proof myself in that regard. So it's, 16 gigs RAM, half terabyte hard drive, because I really don't put much on this hard drive, and the 10 gig Ethernet. And surprisingly, that existed in Refurb. And so it was with Apple Care and taxes and everything else. I want to say it was like $1,100 or something like that. It really wasn't terrible. Like, it was a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but all things considered, it wasn't terrible. So yeah, that's the story.
We really got to get you to like coordinate with my trade-in schedule.
I know, that's true. We really do. Didn't I tell you I'd take that Mac Mini off your hands? Actually, I thought I did.
Well, you both have the same problem. Is when you decide that you want something, you want it now, and coordination means that one or both of you would have to wait.
That's very true.
Casey couldn't even make it past the weekend. It was like, oh, it's supposed to come on a Friday, and it came on a Monday. And forget about waiting for you to be ready to give up your Mac Mini.
Yeah, that you're not wrong. Plus, the thing of it is, like, all kidding aside, I don't know that I would have bought Marco's Mac Mini at the time he was looking to sell it, because I was kicking the can down the road and didn't know what the M2 was going to look like. I think I take your point, and you are right that we should have orchestrated this better, but I don't think at the time I would have taken it.
Plus, wasn't his Mac Mini in the closet with the water?
Yes,
that's true.
Yes, it was.
That's what do you call it? Flood title?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I will say, Apple, they made their trade-in process a little bit worse. I just traded in the two iPads I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, the two old ones, so I could fund the new one. And the trade-in process now is, by default, they don't mail you a box anymore. You have to bring it to a FedEx store. And
interesting.
you can call up Apple and request a box now, but you have to call them on the phone to do that.
Oh, like an animal.
So rather than call them on the phone, I decided, well, I had this couple of days of errands to do, driving, in America the last few days, and so I'm like, all right, well, I'll wait till then, and I'll bring the iPads on that trip, and I'll drop them off.
Use the iPads as packing material for shipping something else.
Right.
Wow.
So the FedEx store is a good 15 minutes from my house. So, it's like a half-hour round trip, to get from, there and back from where I was based. And I get all the way to the stupid FedEx store, and, the people behind the counter start clicking a few buttons. Oh, the computer's being slow. Okay, all right. And he keeps clicking, calls someone else over. Hey, is this right to you? And the various employees eventually conclude, quote, "The system is down."
Oh, cool.
This is not a particularly actionable statement, nor is it probably accurate. I mean, I think, it could just be like, some kind of weird error message that they didn't even read, but it's, oh, it's down. And I was like, all right, well, is this the kind of thing that takes usually a few minutes, a few hours, or a few days to come back up? I need to know this. And, it should be good tomorrow. Great. So, whatever the reason, I had to go home, go back again the next day, another half hour of driving just to drop off these stupid things. I did all of that to avoid making a phone call to Apple, which probably would have been much easier to say, please send me the box that you used to send automatically. Anyway, so for anybody out there, this process is now worse than it used to be.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's frustrating, but it's still easier than selling to people on eBay.
Yeah, that's very true. If you'll permit me just a very brief side topic. I've received my Playdate, and it's adorable, and I really enjoy it.
Oh,
it's
awesome.
It's a stupid, frivolous purchase that I probably wasted my money on, but I don't care because I love it.
That is exactly what it's supposed to be. Nothing. You don't buy the Playdate because you need it for work. I mean, you might. But
hey, I'm talking about it now, so can I write it off? Is that how this works?
I meant you in general. One does not buy the Playdate because they need it for their work. No one needs a Playdate. The Playdate serves no major utility. It's a fun thing made for fun. So I'm curious. So you're still? Do you have anything more than the first two games yet?
Yeah. So I got it. I don't know, no, it was after we recorded, so it must have been Thursday or Friday of last week. It's been Casey Christmas right now, I tell you what. But anyways, so I got it late last week, and then I guess, is it Monday is the turnover day or something like that? I think that's right. But so it starts with Casual Birder and Whitewater Wipeout, and then I also have Boogie Loops, and what is the thing with the Back to the Future looking screen on it? What is this thing called? I don't even remember. It is called Time Travel Adventure. There we go. And I also side-loaded a handful of games. I side-loaded Retro Derby, which is kind of sort of a racing game, which is kind of enjoyable. Playtris, which is basically Tetris. The Drawing Board, which is kind of an Etch-a-Sketch. And Dr. Neario, which is basically Dr. Mario. I really enjoy this thing. It is very small. Like, I've seen them in person, that one Dub, and I've forgotten how freaking tiny it is. It is on the limit of comfortable with my crappy eyesight, even with my contacts in, when my eyesight is actually pretty decent. But nevertheless, this thing is so fun. Of course, Declan is taking quite a liking to it. Of the 4 games, Casual Birder, Whitewater Wipeout, Time Travel Adventure, and Boogie Loops. Boogie Loops does absolutely nothing for me, but I'm horribly not musically inclined. Time Travel Adventure is fun. It's the thing with the stick figure that uses the crank seemingly exclusively. Whitewater Wipeout is okay. I really enjoyed Casual Birder, though, more than I thought I would. That one was a lot of fun. It's kind of sort of a I don't want to say open world, but like
it's like a little adventure game.
Yeah, it's like a little adventure game, but with very low stakes in the good way, and it was a lot of fun. And, the handful of things that have side-loaded I've really enjoyed as well. I really like this thing. It is so cute. The screen, it really should have a light on it, but nevertheless, it is so crisp. It is so crisp. I love the feel of the crank. Like, it's such a stupid thing, and yet I love it. Like, everything about this thing is so cute. Like, it's so thin and small, and it's just fun. And it's, bright yellow, which in some ways, it's a little bit ostentatious, but it's cool because, in the handful of times I've had it in public and been messing with it, a couple times people have been like, what is that? Especially kids actually are like, what in the crap is that thing? So I really like it. It's super fun. John, I presume yours is not even with it. You haven't even gotten a shipping notice yet.
No, there was some email about like, oh, group 2 is something, whatever. But like, I think I'm in group 2, but I haven't really been thinking about it. What I'm hoping is it'll just show up at my door one day, and I'll be like, oh, pleasant surprise.
Have I made a Group W bench joke about that yet?
I don't think so.
No, so I think ultimately, like, I haven't actually even touched it since that group of games came out because I've just been busy with a lot of other stuff right now. So it's like over there waiting for me. But I will say that I think the non-backlit screen was a mistake.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because it looks amazing, like, at one angle of the light, but then at pretty much any other angle, it's kind of eye-strainy, and you kind of wish there was more light. And I understand why they did it, because it is a really cool screen, and it's not available backlit, and putting, like, front lights in front of it is difficult to do well. I understand all that, but in practice, you really want a lit screen, because it is very tricky to get that angle right where it looks amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And plus, I don't know how other people and couples are, but for Aaron and me, we'll typically climb into bed a solid half an hour, in some cases an hour before we fall asleep, and we'll, be reading, reading on our Kindles, reading a physical book, or just messing about on our phones or what have you. And, the last handful of nights I've wanted to play the Playdate for a little bit, and there is not a light on my nightstand. And so she will keep her nightstand light on as she's getting sleepy and getting ready to pass out. But I have to hold the Playdate at like an extremely specific angle. And at this point, my contacts are out. So I need to have this thing like literally 6 inches from my face. Otherwise, it's blurry as hell. And so it's just like untenable. Like it really just does not work.
You need the Game Boy front lights. That's what you need.
Yeah, or the original Kindle.
But the original Kindle was a reflective screen, though. Like the people who are confused about this, it's not an e-ink screen. It is not reflective. It is transmissive. So shining a huge amount of light on this screen, I would imagine, is not going to be the same as shining a huge amount of light on an e-ink screen.
I would say it looks a lot closer to e-ink than old LCDs.
Yes, it does. It really does.
Like in the sense, like the pixels look like they're super right on top. It is a nice matte finish. But in general, though, I do think it is this wonderful, cute thing. And in many ways, the hardware is a home run. However, I think in this particular decision, I think this was probably the wrong decision. That being said, I'm still delighted by the thing. It's still very fun. I haven't found yet like one absolutely must-have killer app, but I will say in that first group of games so far that I played out of those 4, certainly the Casual Birder stands out as like the best one. But that being said, these are not games you're going to keep playing for years. This is a game. These are games you're going to play through once and have fun, and it's going to take you a few hours maybe for some of the more adventure-y ones like that, and then you'll move on. We'll see how it goes over time. But it is a very fun thing.
Yeah, it's so cute and so innocent. Like, that's an odd thing to say about a physical device. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's so cute and innocent, and I just really like it. And like, in order to start it up, you click the little like lock button or press the little lock button twice, and it looks like it's opening its eyes. Like, you press it once and one eye opens, you press it again, the other eye opens. Like, it's just so adorable and fun, and it makes me feel, or it reminds me of, I guess maybe what it is that it's nostalgic in a way, even though it's a brand new device and it has a crank, but it's nostalgic of the time when I got my original Game Boy, right? And I was talking to Declan about this just last night. Like, the original Game Boy, my recollection of it was that the screen was utter trash even for the time.
Oh, it was terrible.
By today's standards, it was even worse. It was a tremendous brick of a device. It blew through batteries ridiculously fast. Not as fast as the Game Gear, mind you, which would last a measure of minutes.
True.
But ridiculously fast nonetheless. And yet I loved that device. Like, I loved my original Game Boy more than almost anything in the world, because that one was mine. It was all mine. It wasn't the shared family NES. That was Casey's Game Boy. And so I love that thing so much. And the Playdate reminds me in many ways of that, insofar as it isn't just mine, because Declan is trying to steal it every chance he can get. But it's just that innocent fun, like, everything about it is just so cute and adorable. And I know that's such an odd way to describe hardware or describe a console, but I really do enjoy it.